All right, hi everybody. I also wanted to take the opportunity to introduce Tanja Thomas, who is here from HHS and master of all things having to do with PMS. She's in the back there. Do you want to stand up, Tanja? Everybody give her a round of applause. Yes, that's how you all get paid, is our wonderful Tanja. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions on PMS, every single site visit I do has a question on PMS. So please know that she's up there. She also does regular online courses and can also provide additional information if that's something that you would like. Just let us know. And I'll let Pat's going to clarify a couple of questions.
Okay. Before we start our next panel discussion, I did want to clarify from this morning, and we already got a question and answer on it, and I wanted to do it anyway. The question was, do all the policy priorities from the previous panel have to be addressed on all applications? No, the answer is no. The panel that we had this morning was representative of particular priorities that DRL must do. So quasi hard earmarks expectations from the Hill or from the Secretary or from the President. That is not the that is not all the sum of everything that we do. Those are not the only policy priorities we have, but that was to give you a representation of the ones we must do or we have to do or we want to do. So no, those are not supposed to be the only priorities we have, nor do you have to address all of them. This is a nice segue to the next panel, which will talk though about how we do expect you to incorporate marginalized populations in the work that you do where appropriate. So the next session will focus on that. So how do we make sure that we are including women, persons with disabilities, LGBT, ethnic, religious minorities? That we do expect you to do, to reflect that in your applications. And so this is going to give you some ideas about how to do that. But in terms of you must do internet freedom or you must do LGBT rights in what you do, no, that is not an expectation. The policy priorities for DRL are quite broad. As you know, we have particular countries that might be priorities, whether they be Syria or Ukraine or China, Burma, that's just a few of them. We also have a wide range of policy priorities. It might be anything from effecting transitional justice to supporting independent media, freedom of expression, freedom of association, support for civil society. So what you saw here were just the ones that we have particular envoys or offices that work on those. I hope that clarifies it. That is not the sum total of everything that we do. Are there just any questions about that? If I told you exactly what our priorities are, you would know exactly what RFPs are coming up. So, but just that's why to talk about how our work is focused around supporting the fundamental freedoms that are in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the fundamental freedoms that we talk about in our Human Rights Report. That should give you a sense where the crises are on the ground right now or where there are opportunities. So you will tend to see DRL focusing on those places that are in the midst of a conflict or about to have a conflict or just came out of a conflict. You will see us in places where there are democratic openings, where democracy is backsliding. Those are the types of places that we normally go into and do our programs. So next panel here. Okay, we're going to do some more of the Q&As right now? Okay. Come on up.
Okay. All right, hi everybody. I learn how to dance and dance whenever I need to. So we're going to address some of the questions that were put in the question and answer box. Again, you still have time to put more questions out there. It's over there by the evaluations feedback table. So I'm just going to read off the questions and then do my best to answer them. And Karen Field is also coming in, but we might save hers for later. How much room is there, if any, to address themes like transitional justice or closing space for civil society within your policy priorities? I would say that there's a lot of space. Again, you're looking at the context of the countries that we are doing our requests for proposals for. So within that scope, within the scope of the RFP that's put out, they will focus in on areas that you can elaborate on. DRL is actually one of the leading offices or bureaus within the State Department that addresses transitional justice. We've had the lead on this for about 15 years and done this all over the world in almost every single region. So there is absolutely space for addressing transitional justice issues within the program and policy priorities. And just following up on what Pat had referenced, again, we don't need you to address every single policy priority that was on the stage, but one thing that we do stress in every single program is the inclusiveness of at-risk and marginalized populations. So the extent possible and what population that would be to address should be included in those proposals. That is something DRL has taken the lead on, not just within the State Department, but internally in the US government. Inclusive programming is something that we prioritize, that we value, and that's actually the next panel that you will be having a presentation of. We've had a lot of organizations ask us, what are the best practices for doing inclusive programming? And again, much to your credit, nobody wants to do any harm in doing programming. So building up that expertise and making sure that those marginalized and at-risk populations are being addressed is vital in the programs. Going back to the transitional justice discussion, we found that much of those local programs and those local mechanisms, they start off with, the women on the ground who are missing their husbands, or the children who no longer have parents, or, the activists come out of those, and those are the ones that actually continue on the actual passionate and on the ground implementation of these programs. So it's vital that those populations are given a seat at the table. It's vital that those populations are sought information from, and that your programming is inclusive of these these populations as well. So, what is your advice for a new organization that is comprised of individuals who have worked elsewhere and developed past performance reputations but do not have organizational performance record currently? Our advice would be to make that very clear in your proposals. Make it very clear, provide justification. Show how these individuals have that experience, how that experience links up and provides support to those programs. So again, throughout all the proposals, we would advise justify, make it clear, have somebody that doesn't know anything about your organization or your program read it, is it clear to them? Is it possible to give examples of some types of organizations you fund, even if not the names? Sure, we support organizations that work on human rights and democracy. These are and labor, and we're looking for organizations that have the experience and the ability and to be able to implement programs contextually in the countries that they're working in. It's very important that it's not. Again, I just want to emphasize, we've all worked for NGOs. We've stolen a lot of your people too. Apologies. So we understand that, funding is very important to organizations. But at the same time, we want to make sure that those organizations have the experience to work on the ground. We program from a very do no harm perspective, and we want to make sure that that context and those connections and the ability to recognize the local organizations that need to be brought and empowered is also within those proposals. So again, we look for organizations that are funded or funding activists that, are they here? Oh, sorry.
No, I just wanted to add to it.
Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to add to that to explain that, yes, we work with many organizations that have been around for decades, and we work with ones that are brand new. Obviously, those that have been around for decades and have managed U.S. government funding before might have more polished applications, but that doesn't mean they're the ones who always win. Again, it's really the quality of the idea. We are willing to take risks. We do fund new organizations. Many times we will designate them high risk just because that means they need more oversight than somebody who's more established or has a good track record. But that doesn't mean that we're not willing to take those risks. That doesn't mean that that's what we're looking for, only those who've been doing this for year after year after year. We are always open to new organizations, and as Kat mentioned, we're particularly interested in those who do have connections on the ground. The last thing we want is somebody who's based in, say, Washington DC, who's actually never set foot in that country. Those are the types that we don't want to fund. But I don't feel like because we keep stressing organizational capacity and experience, again, if you have somebody who's worked for another organization, or has that capacity, make sure you put that in the key personnel section. We read that too. We read every part of those proposals. So a lot of times that's what we'll look at. Well, this is a new organization. We haven't worked with it before, but we know this individual, or we know the organization they used to work for. So what we need to do is to make sure we have access to all that information that proves your case.
Exactly. There's a couple of questions that are country-specific. That we will actually defer to the program officers that are covering those specific regions. That will be available to you right after the conference, just to get some information out of them and make sure that you're connecting with them as well.
And I also, sorry, this is our regular dog and pony show here. In terms of priorities, it's an open secret that we do have regular funding for China, Cuba, Pakistan, and Iraq. So for those of you who never knew that, you should know that those countries, we have sort of a quasi-regular stream of funding, so we will be continue to do programming in those countries.
Correct.
As well as the NERD funding.
We have a plea to please provide access to the slideshow presentations. We will. As a matter of fairness and transparency, everything that was presented here today will be transcribed and put on our website in addition to the slideshow. So you will all have access to that, as will everyone else, hopefully in the world that might be applying. Why do we have some statements of interest requests as opposed to RFPs? Which I will note that RFPs will soon be changed to NOFOs. Yeah. Notice of funding opportunity. So when we're like NOFO, you'll know what we're talking about. So sometimes we request statements of interest. Again, most of us have worked in the NGO community and have written proposals that you have just worked and slaved away at for many, many, many months sometimes. So we understand how difficult it is and all the love and passion that's put into writing a proposal. In many cases where we expect a multitude of proposals, we will ask for a statement of interest so that not, tens of hundreds of organizations are not spending a month long, 2 months long writing proposals out. So in those cases where we expect, many, many proposals, it often goes to a statement of interest. So you're only writing a 2 to 3 page statement of interest as opposed to an entire proposal, which we know is not necessary if we're going to be cutting it down so much.
And it's also reflected in those particular themes or regions where we might have, again, a relatively large amount of funding. So we're trying to first get out there, again, the quality of the ideas. The SOIs are designed to make it user-friendly for you, not waste your time, but also give you an opportunity to throw out some creative ideas. Then we can come back if you make it through that first stage, then we can come back and say, well, a little bit more on this, a little less on that. But we can't do that in every place because many times we only have funding to do one small one-off program, and doing a SOI just doesn't make sense.
Because it is a 2-stage proposal and panel review. So we basically have to do the panel twice. So it takes twice as long. So there are pros and cons to having a statement of interest. If we don't expect that many proposals to come in, we might just cut straight to the RFP process. Just flagging that our Internet Freedom annual program statement is a statement of interest, but that is up all year long. So you will be able to apply for that all year. It's done on a rolling basis to make sure that we're able to capture the most innovative approaches as they happen, as opposed to having to wait for them to come in when we do put out RFPs. Okay.
The reason we're able to do that is, again, because we have a dedicated sum of money for Internet Freedom.
Yes. Did I miss anything, Betsy? All right, do you fund US-based organizations doing international research, say, for example, on the closing space for civil society worldwide? Are we more likely to be successful if working with people in the field? You want to take that one?
Well, the short answer is yes. The stronger answer is yes, that it's actually should be helping people on the ground. We recognize the importance of doing research, but our funding is really appropriated for actually making change happen on the ground. It's not that we wouldn't accept research, but it has to be really tied in with actually doing some type of foreign assistance to help people on the
broader
ground.
program.
Broader program. You should all be aware of USAID's Center for Excellence on Democracy, Human Rights, and Governance. They are the ones who are able to fund a lot of research because they have a different mandate than we do.
And please use USAID's Center for Excellence to fund your research. We appreciate it when you do. I think is that it? Oh, Karen. Yeah, I think that's all I have. You want to come up and do yours?
Jessica, they're not here yet?
So we have the pleasure of having Karen Field, or Karen Fageld, as I like to call her, come up and answer a few questions. She is our grants officer extraordinaire. One thing I want to stress about our programs and our funding is how absolutely flexible and concerned with with the organizations that we work with we are. We take your security very seriously. We take your ability to do your programs and make them successful very seriously. We try to be as flexible as possible. We cannot be flexible without the wonderful oversight and help from our wonderful grants officers. And Karen is a stalwart advocate for all the organizations. So I'd like to give her a round of applause. Actually, all of our AQM colleagues, including Joe Sandor. I think Tyra and Joe and Jasmine are here as
I don't know
well.
if Tyra and Jasmine are still here. Joe's here.
So I think that we just want to stress communication is key. As long as there are justifications that are reasonable and logical. This team has really worked with us to make sure that you all remain safe and your programs can continue. So please know that, again, we focus in on closing societies and closing spaces. So we understand the security concerns, we understand the sensitivities, and we really appreciate all the risks that are taken on. But again, we couldn't do any of that without our grants team.
So I actually probably know most of you by email, if not in person, and we do have some questions. Just to clarify, Joe and I actually work for a different bureau in the Department of State, the Administration Bureau. We are in AQM. AQM does grants administration for those bureaus that don't have an embedded grant shop, like ECA or PRM, who some of you also may work with. So there's kind of a separation of management. But that said, we actually sit in the same building as our DRL colleagues, and we have a very good communication back and forth and try to work out any issues internally before we go out with an answer. So you may see a lot of collaborative emails going back and forth between us.
It was important for us to, sorry. It was very important for us to make sure that we had embedded grants officers because of the complexity and the sensitivities of our program. So we are very happy to have them right next to us, and we drive them a little bit crazy, but.
So having said that, one of the first questions we had is what is the difference between, what is the issues does a GOR handle versus what needs to be referred to GO, grants officers. So I would actually say, does everybody know what a GOR is? It's the grants officer responsibility. We defer, we give some of the responsibilities to a GOR, grants officer representative. Usually the GOR memo is attached to your agreement, so that will delineate out what their responsibilities are, and it should be signed so that you know that they've accepted those responsibilities. It is a legal responsibility that they have to help work with us. I think a best practice is to kind of include the both of us on email chains. I generally won't jump in unless it's something that I might ask the GOR first, saying, is there a financial shift here? Is there a shift in the proposal? Is there a shift in the scope? Because that may require a budget amendment or a no-cost action or an extension. So, you know, it can be a best practice to have both of us on an email chain, but generally you may just hear back from one of us. If you're asking for additional approvals and the GOR is sending you, the grants officer has approved this, hopefully he or she has embedded our actual approvals. A lot of that especially happens at the end of the fiscal year when we don't have much bandwidth but to deal with new money going out the door. Usually by August, September, you start hearing less and less from the GO, and you'll hear more from the GOR because we just don't have a lot of time to do much besides make sure that grants get out the door and get out and get going with the work so we don't lose money. If and ever in doubt, please ask us, both of us, or get clarification. Anything that has to do with money shifts, with how money is spent, with anything that has been required for prior approvals, that very definitely is the grants officer. Generally speaking, anything that is technical to your program, that's going to be your GOR. They are the subject matter experts. We rely on them. When internet freedom people speak, it's usually like, wah, 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 is how my understanding of what they're telling me. So I assume that they're telling me that this is good versus this is bad. And actually, that's Joe's portfolio, so he probably understands a little bit more than I do.
But I would also like to emphasize the grants office representative and the grants officer, the GO, is the warranted individual that has the authority of the president, or actually of the secretary, to be able to sign on behalf of the secretary to provide a grant. The GOR, the grants officer representative, is legally named as the individual that they delegate responsibilities down to. It is not usually somebody at an embassy, so, or any of our policy officers. These are confined to our programming office. So make sure that you're looking at who it is that's actually in the grant agreement as notified as your grants officer representative. We often, not often, every once in a while, we'll have an occasional somebody else who is a representative of the State Department might provide guidance on a program, which leads to cost implications, which leads to some issues. Again, then that turns into an issue for the organization because that's not necessarily something that's been approved by the grants officer. We've had occasions where organizations have had to cover those costs, so we want to avoid that as much as possible.
So, and also, please make sure that you people in the field know who those people are. That's one of the things that when we do a kickoff meeting, I stress, because especially somebody in the field, they may not distinguish, well, this person is from the Department of State and they're telling me this is a great idea, or this person is from the US government and it is a great idea and it fits well and it's fabulous. Come to us first. There's two people that have the right to, I actually have the ultimate right to say yes or no if I've signed it, or Joe is the grants officer on what he signed it. It's our legal responsibility. We're the only ones that can say, you can use your money this way. The proposal you gave and the budget you gave when you got the agreement, it was your best guess. It probably is going to change. I do boring budget amendments, as does Joe, because the rubber hits the road and you're like, oh, well, I don't need it for here. I need it for there. Okay, let's shift it. So, it's not that you said you're going to do this and it's the box and we can't go out of the box. I expect the box to be really shifted, and if you're not shifting, I'm going to be very impressed. So it's a discussion between the GOR, the grants officer, and you guys as you implement, and we need to figure out what can we change, when do we change it, and is it legally changeable? And what I've often said is I have a box of regulations, which, as we all know, is about to change. I will creatively problem solve within that box to make, if it's in the best interest of the program. If it isn't, if it's something that can't be changed because I've hit the walls or Joe's hit the walls, you'll know. We'll try to communicate as to why we can't allow that. So just keep good communication and transparent communication with us.
And with that, Pat Morris has arrived.
We'll come back.